Shyne. On December 27, 1999, Club New York in Manhattan was overflowing with celebrities. It was one of those nights where the entire hip-hop industry seemed packed into one room. Sean Diddy Combs was there, Jennifer Lopez was there, and so was a 21-year-old rapper from Belize named Moses Shyne Barrow, a young artist on the rise and a new face in Diddy's bad boy orbit.
Obviously, he was the uber star, and I was just up and coming, so, yeah, it's gonna be a show. But he used that to just threw me off. It was terrible, man.
The energy inside the club shifted fast. According to multiple accounts, a local street enforcer named Matthew Scar Allen got into a heated confrontation with Diddy. Words were exchanged, egos flared, and at some point, cash was allegedly thrown in Diddy's face. Moments later, chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out inside the club, people screamed and scattered, and when the smoke cleared, 3 innocent bystanders were bleeding on the floor. Diddy and Jennifer Lopez bolted from the scene in a Lincoln Navigator. Shyne didn't make it out. Police arrested him and quickly labeled him the shooter. From that moment on, the narrative was set. Shyne was charged as the lone gunman, while Diddy positioned himself as just another man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The trial exposed a harsh imbalance. Diddy sat at the defense table surrounded by elite legal muscle, Johnny Cochran, Benjamin Braffman, and a team built to win. Shyne, meanwhile, had his own lawyer and nowhere near the same level of protection.
While all eyes were fixated on the hip-hop mogul, few paid much, if any, attention to the plight of his 22-year-old protege.
The courtroom drama played out exactly how power usually works. Diddy was acquitted on all charges. Shyne was convicted and sentenced to 10 years for assault and gun possession. Almost immediately, the streets started talking. People whispered that Shyne had taken the fall, that he had protected his boss and paid the price for it. Then, decades later, the story cracked wide open. In March 2024, Natanya Rubin, one of the victims who had been shot in the face that night, came forward with a stunning recantation. She stated clearly and publicly that Shyne was not the shooter. According to her, it was Sean Combs who pulled the trigger.
You have said since really right after the shooting that it was P. Diddy who shot you.
I literally watched them pull out the guns. I've had a clear point of view. For God's sake, I got shot in my nose. I was facing them directly. I watched everything occur.
Her claims lined up with something that had been overlooked for years. Ballistics experts at the original trial testified that the wounds were likely caused by a .40 caliber weapon. Shyne had a 9mm. By then, the damage had already been done. Shyne served 9 years in prison, was deported to Belize, and rebuilt his life from scratch. Today, he stands as the leader of the opposition in Belizean politics. Meanwhile, Diddy's legacy is unraveling under the weight of federal trafficking charges. See murder. On January 12, 2002, outside the Platinum Club in Harvey, Louisiana, 16-year-old Steve Thomas, a die-hard No Limit Records fan, got caught up in something far bigger than him. After a small scuffle, Thomas was beaten and shot once in the chest. He died from the wound, and almost immediately, police zeroed in on Corey C. Murder Miller, the younger brother of rap mogul Master P.
I grabbed Corey. I'm like, chill, big dog. So he's like, all right, cool, big dog, cool. But he went back to fighting. So when he went back to fighting, I heard that pow.
Steve Thomas was just lying there in a pool of blood. He ended up dying from a single gunshot wound to the heart.
C. Murder already had a reputation. Just weeks earlier, he had been involved in an incident at Club Rags in Baton Rouge where a gun fired once before jamming during a confrontation with a bouncer. Even so, Miller maintained he had nothing to do with the death of the teenager outside the Platinum Club. The case dragged on for years, but the 2009 retrial exposed how shaky the conviction really was. Miller was found guilty by a 10-2 jury verdict, legal in Louisiana at the time, but later ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. What the public didn't see was what happened inside that jury room. Juror Mary Jacob later revealed that deliberations were abusive and traumatic. A 20-year-old Xavier University student on the jury initially voted not guilty. Other jurors relentlessly pressured her, yelling and berating her until she became physically ill, vomiting in the bathroom. Eventually, she changed her vote. In 2018, the case cracked open on the show Reasonable Doubt. Two key prosecution witnesses, bouncer Darnell Jordan and Kenneth Jordan, recanted their testimony.
They just kept trying to pressure me. I never seen a gun, never, ever. When I pulled Corey from the fight, his hands like this, no weapon, none.
Kenneth signed an affidavit stating detectives threatened him with 10 years in prison on unrelated charges if he didn't identify C. Murder as the shooter. Despite those revelations and public support from figures like Kim Kardashian and Monica, a federal judge upheld a conviction in 2023. C. Murder remains locked inside Angola prison, serving a life sentence. Grant Williams. On April 5, 1996, Good Friday in the Stapleton housing projects of Staten Island, a drug-related turf war turned deadly. At around 6 p.m., Shadell Lewis was shot and killed. By 10 p.m., the NYPD claimed they had their suspect, Grant Williams, a 25-year-old who worked at the Wu-Tang Clan's recording studio and was practically family to Ghostface Killah. The case against Williams never made sense. The prosecution's star piece of evidence was a green Wu-Tang Clan baseball cap allegedly dropped by the shooter. That was it.
There was a shooting, and for some bizarre reason, you get caught up in it. They said somebody was wearing a Wu-Tang Clan hat.
The investigation was riddled with tunnel vision. The officer who chased the suspect initially radioed a description of a stocky black male standing about 5'5". Grant Williams was 6'2" and thin. That alone should have stopped the case cold. It didn't. Police ignored a family friend of the victim who insisted Williams wasn't the shooter. Even worse, the NYPD destroyed the Wu-Tang cap in 2000 without ever testing it for DNA. Williams had an airtight alibi. He was at the Wu-Tang studio all night. At one point, someone even walked into the studio and told everyone Lewis had just been killed in Stapleton while Williams was standing right there. Still, he went to prison. It took 23 years for justice to catch up. In 2017, the Conviction Integrity Review Unit reopened the case and uncovered 13 witnesses whose statements had been ignored or suppressed. In 2021, Grant Williams was officially exonerated, the first such case in Staten Island history.
A rousing ovation for Grant Williams, finally cleared after 25 years of a murder he did not commit. Williams' defense team found new evidence and 6 witnesses who said he wasn't the shooter.
He walked free with a $7 million settlement, and Ghostface Killah stood beside him, later saying that when Grant went to prison, a piece of him went with him. McKinley Phipps. On February 20th, 2000, during No Limit Records' peak era, McKinley Phipps was one of the South's sharpest lyricists. Fans called him the Down South Nas. That night, a small venue called Club Mercedes in Slidell, Louisiana, hosted an open mic. Mac didn't even want to attend. He was tired from touring, but his mother was working the door and his father was inside. After midnight, a fight broke out. A single gunshot cut through the noise, and 19-year-old Baron Victor Jr. collapsed, bleeding on the floor. Mac pulled out his legally registered firearm, not to shoot, but to protect himself, while searching for his parents in the chaos. His gun was never fired.
I pulled my gun out and held it over my head because I didn't want to bump into anybody. You know, I was looking for my mom. I wanted to go secure her, make sure she was straight. I didn't want to risk bumping into somebody and having the gun go off, so I held it above my head. I'm taller than everybody, so I'm like, if this gun is here, everybody is safe.
The facts didn't matter. Gunshot residue tests came back negative. Mac's weapon was fully loaded. Then something unheard of happened. A man named Thomas Williams turned himself in and confessed to the shooting. Detectives turned him away. His story didn't fit the narrative they had already written.
I was panicking. I reached in like 5. Because I was nervous. I didn't know what else to do. I was protecting myself.
So it was inside your waistband?
Yeah.
But it wasn't no kind of holster?
No. Just panicking.
After you shot him, what happened?
Everybody just started running.
Instead, prosecutors attacked Mac's image. They turned his rap persona, camouflage assassin, into a weapon, frightening the jury with lyrics taken out of context. They even spliced lines from different songs together, including references to his Vietnam veteran father, to paint Mac as violent and unstable. The trial took place shortly after 9/11 in a tense, fearful environment before an all-white jury. Mac was convicted by another non-unanimous 10-2 verdict and sentenced to 30 years for manslaughter. Years later, witnesses admitted they had been threatened with prison time if they didn't blame him. Mac served 21 years before being granted clemency in 2021. Brandon Duncan, Tiny Do. In 2014 in San Diego, Brandon Duncan, known in the streets and on the mic as Tiny Do, found himself trapped in a legal nightmare. Duncan was facing 25 years to life in prison, not for committing a violent crime, but for releasing a mixtape. Tiny Do had no criminal record. Prosecutors openly admitted he wasn't present at any of the 9 gang-related shootings they were investigating. His only offense was a 2014 mixtape titled No Safety. The San Diego District Attorney's Office leaned on an obscure and rarely used statute, California Penal Code Section 182.5. Their argument was built on a stretch of logic so extreme it shocked legal scholars nationwide. The state claimed that because Duncan was labeled a gang member, crimes committed by other alleged members boosted the gang's reputation. That increased street credibility, prosecutors argued, would indirectly help Duncan's music career by making his image more authentic. In their eyes, that meant he benefited from the violence he had nothing to do with, and that benefit was enough to charge him with conspiracy.
Tiny Do and fellow gang members increased their stature, respect, and fear from rival gang members following a rash of shootings in San Diego, and that would have raised Tiny Do's image as a rapper, too.
So for 7 months, he sat in a jail cell, watching his life stall out because prosecutors didn't like what he rapped about.
I'm just painting the picture of the story. That's it. I'm not telling, am I ever telling somebody to go, hey, go commit this crime?
Eventually, Judge Louis Hanoyan stepped in and shut the entire thing down. He ruled the conspiracy charges require an actual crime tied to the defendant, not hypothetical benefits and imagined outcomes. In simpler terms, you can't lock someone up for a crime they didn't commit just because you don't like their music. Tiny Do walked free, but the damage had already been done. His case became a national flashpoint for the Rap on Trial movement. He later received a $737,500 settlement for wrongful arrest and emerged as a central figure behind California's Decriminalizing Artistic Expression Act Assembly Bill 2799. The law made California the first state to seriously restrict the use of rap lyrics as evidence. Huwe Burton. On January 3, 1989, the Bronx was drowning in violence. More than 2,400 murders would be recorded that year, and fear lived in every hallway. That morning, 16-year-old Huwe Burton came home from school and walked into a horror no child should ever see. His mother, Keziah Burton, had been stabbed to death in her bedroom.
In 1989, when he was just 16 years old, Burton returned from school to find his mother, Keziah Burton, stabbed to death in their Bronx, New York home.
Instead of comfort, Huwe was met with suspicion. Police immediately isolated him and began interrogating the teenage high school sophomore for hours. Without a lawyer and without any adult protection, detectives used fear as a weapon. They threatened to charge him with statutory rape involving his girlfriend. They told him his father would take him home if he just signed a statement. Exhausted, terrified, and grieving, Huwe broke.
They just kept saying that they knew that I was guilty and that I should just admit to it, and I'm not knowing why I'm being accused.
They made him write that he killed his mother over $200 he owed a drug dealer. This story made no sense, and it didn't last long. Within days, police found Keziah's stolen car being driven by the downstairs tenant, a man with a long criminal history. That should have ended the case right there. Instead, everything got buried. Rather than admit they had arrested the wrong person, police allegedly protected their original narrative. Evidence pointing to the tenant was ignored. Notes from Huwe's teacher proving he was in class during the murder were suppressed. The system had already decided it had its guy. Huwe Burton was sentenced to 15 years to life. Inside prison, he had to grow up fast. Hip-hop became his emotional lifeline. Running became his therapy. He turned laps around prison yards to survive the mental weight of being trapped in a concrete box for a crime he didn't commit. It took 30 years for the truth to finally break through. In 2019, the Bronx District Attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit vacated his conviction, citing modern research on coerced confessions and false admissions by juveniles. Tupac Shakur. On November 18, 1993, the Parker Meridian Hotel in Manhattan became the center of a legal storm that still clouds the legacy of Tupac Shakur. Tupac, already one of the most influential and controversial voices in hip-hop, was accused of participating in a violent essay against the 19-year-old woman he met at a nightclub days earlier. From the start, the case was messy. The accuser had left Tupac a voicemail the day after their initial encounter, praising him and speaking positively about their consensual interaction. Still, prosecutors moved forward, leaning heavily on a narrative that didn't fully line up with the timeline or behavior described. The trial itself felt surreal. Just one day after jury deliberations began, Tupac was lured to Quad Studios in Times Square by James henchman Rosemond with a promise of $7,000 for a guest verse. Instead, Tupac was ambushed, robbed, and shot 5 times. He believed it was a coordinated hit, and many still agree.
Everybody that was there knows what happened.
Against doctors' orders, Tupac checked himself out of the hospital and showed up to court the next day in a wheelchair, his head wrapped in bandages beneath a Yankees cap. It was one of the most iconic and disturbing images in hip-hop history. The verdict felt like a compromise. The jury acquitted Tupac of the most serious charges, including sodomy and gun possession, but convicted him on 2 counts of essay for forcibly touching the woman's buttocks. Meanwhile, his co-defendants, represented by court-appointed lawyers, either had their charges dismissed or served no time at all. Digging deeper only raised more questions. Tupac's attorney, Michael Warren, later discovered that one co-defendant, Jacques Haitian Jack Agnant, was a suspected government informant. Despite a long criminal record, Haitian Jack never served real time. While Tupac appealed his conviction from prison, Suge Knight famously bailed him out $0.4 million after Tupac signed a death row contract on a napkin. Tupac maintained his innocence until his death, even telling his accuser at sentencing that he hoped one day she would tell the truth. Mac Minister. On May 23, 2005, Las Vegas turned deadly when Anthony Fat Tone Watkins and Jermaine Cowboy Akins were lured into a dark alley and murdered. Almost immediately, the blame fell on Andre Mac Minister Dow, a well-known Bay Area rapper and promoter. Prosecutors framed the case as simple retaliation, blood for blood, revenge for the 2004 killing of Mac Dre in Kansas City.
Dow was convicted in 2008 for a double murder in Las Vegas in 2005.
I don't know who killed Fat Tone.
But the case against Mac Minister was anything but clean. The trial quickly spiraled into a legal disaster. In a shocking move, Mac Minister's own defense attorney, Keith Brower, took the stand and testified against his client, a massive violation of attorney-client privilege. Dow later claimed the judge pressured Brower, allegedly threatening his law firm with financial ruin if he refused to cooperate. The prosecution's key witness, Antoine Cantrell, testified under a false name, Mouton. There was no DNA evidence, no murder weapon, no credible eyewitness tying Dow directly to the case. Years later, the case unraveled even further. Cantrell signed a sworn affidavit admitting he had lied under oath. He said detectives coached his testimony and that guilt had haunted him for helping put an innocent man away for life. None of it mattered. Courts repeatedly denied Dow a new trial. Despite the recantation and despite the lack of physical evidence, Andre Mac Minister Dow was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without parole.
They gave me 4 lives without the possibility of parole.
Today, he remains behind the walls of High Desert State Prison, still proclaiming his innocence. Tattooed across his back are words that double as defiance in survival code: "Thou shalt not snitch." X-rated. In March 1992, Sacramento became the backdrop for what the media would later call the rap story of the century. Honoré X-Rated Brown was just 17 years old, already signed to Black Market Records and buzzing as one of the West Coast's most raw new voices. That night, he was part of a gang-related home invasion meant to hit rivals. It was supposed to be intimidation and retaliation, not a murder. But in a dark hallway, things went sideways fast. Shots rang out and 42-year-old Patricia Harris, a grandmother who had nothing to do with the beef, was struck in the heart and killed. Brown never denied being there. He openly admitted he went into that house intending to hurt those dudes. What he consistently denied was being the one who pulled the trigger that killed Harris. That distinction didn't matter to prosecutors. California's felony murder rule gave them everything they needed. Under that law, if someone dies during the commission of a felony, everyone involved can be charged with murder, regardless of who fired the fatal shot. But the state didn't stop there. They turned X-Rated's art into their most powerful weapon. His debut album, Psychoactive, became a centerpiece of the trial. Prosecutors pointed to the album cover, arguing that the gun he was holding matched the caliber of the murder weapon. Then came the lyrics. Lines pulled from his songs were treated not as exaggerated street rap, but as literal confessions. When the state quoted bars like, "I'm killing names, daddies, and nephews," they were telling the jury this was a diary entry set to music. The strategy worked. X-Rated was convicted of first-degree murder and sent to maximum security prison. What followed was 26 years behind the walls, much of it in some of the harshest conditions California had to offer. Plus, prison life came with its own dangers too. In 2010, he was stabbed 7 times after refusing to record an album for a prison gang.
Well, you got stabbed multiple times.
Yeah, I did get stabbed, yeah.
Now, this is in the middle of the hope at the end of the, you see, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. From what I understand, you were essentially approached to help put out some music from somebody in prison, and you said no.
Now most artists would have disappeared, but X-Rated did the opposite. From inside prison, he became a legend. He recorded nearly 20 albums while incarcerated, sometimes rapping verses through a prison payphone with a metronome ticking in his ear on the other end. By spending 26 years behind bars, Honore Brown was finally granted parole and released in September 2018. Reports reveal that even fellow inmates, including the infamous Menendez brothers, had written letters supporting his parole, praising his personal growth and commitment to helping others while incarcerated. In 2018, X-Rated finally walked free. Lil Boosie. On October 21, 2009, a shooting on Vermilion Drive in Baton Rouge set the stage for one of the most dangerous legal battles a rapper had faced in the South. Terry Boyd was shot and killed inside a home, and almost immediately, the state zeroed in on Lil Boosie. Prosecutors claimed it was a murder for hire, alleging Boosie paid $2,800 to a 17-year-old named Michael Marlowe Mike Louding to carry out the hit over a personal dispute.
Let's get you up to speed. Lil Boosie, whose real name is Torrance Hatch, is accused of hiring Michael Louding to kill Terry Boyd. Investigators say Louding is tied to 6 murders. Louding will likely testify against Boosie during his trial in April.
The accusation alone was enough to shake the culture. Boosie wasn't just any rapper, he was the voice of Baton Rouge, and that's exactly what the prosecution used against him. In a move that terrified artists everywhere, Judge Mike Irwin allowed Boosie's lyrics into evidence. Assistant District Attorney Dana Cummings stood in court and stripped songs like 187 and Body Bag of their beats, reading the lyrics out loud to the jury like they were transcripts of a crime. Every slang term was weaponized. 187, Merc, and Cake were framed as coded admissions of murder and payment. Prosecutors even argued the songs were recorded just hours before Boyd's death, suggesting the music was part of the plot itself. The state's entire case rested on Marlowe Mike. He was their star witness, but once he hit the stand, everything collapsed. Louding recanted his confession in front of the jury, saying detectives pressured him into lying by claiming they had magic, a vague threat implying evidence that didn't actually exist. Suddenly, the foundation of the prosecution's case cracked wide open. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury didn't even need an hour. After just 60 minutes of deliberation, they returned with a unanimous not guilty verdict on May 11, 2012. Boosie broke down in tears as the decision was read. While he still had time to serve at Angola on a separate drug conviction, Boosie had won the fight that mattered most.